the idea of setting things up before the session started has gone for a toss. I always find it easier to stick to the time if there is a presentation. It's more for to keep me on track than for the audience. So I am going to talk about SDG 11, which is about sustainable cities. Some people might be surprised to see me talking about this, those who know me, because I generally am talking about rural energy issues. So let me first qualify where I am coming from. For the last couple of years, I have been spearheading this project called Sustainably Smart Pune. I come from Pune. The idea with this project is that we are trying to develop a roadmap for Pune city to be sustainable by 2030. This has nothing to do with the smart city mission. Pune is also supposed to be a smart city. It is not linked with that whole process. This is an academic exercise which is part of a larger project of Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change, of which I am a member. Under this, we are looking at trying to develop roadmaps for sustainability for 3 cities, Pune, Visakhapatnam, and well, not entire New Delhi, but a part of New Delhi. With the idea that these 3 cities are in 3 different parts of the country and at 3 different levels in their development trajectory. So the overall objective is that we can then, looking at these 3 case studies, come up with a policy framework for urban development to be more sustainability focused. So the whole idea is not to do this only from ideological perspective, but to be able to show a direct comparison that you take city A, and if you develop it in this way versus you develop it in this way, what are the costs and benefits? That kind of an analysis is what we feel will make the argument a bit more powerful. So from that context, we have been looking at development of this goal 11 and the various targets under it. The only available indicator at this point in time from Government of India is just for target 11.1. So that makes my job a bit easy. The target is that by 2030 ensure access for all to adequate, safe and affordable housing and basic services and upgrade slums. 2 indicators have been proposed. One is proportion of urban population living in slums, etc., etc. Again, I think this relates to process indicator versus outcome indicator. We feel that there should be an indicator which measures the rate at which populations are moving out of slums into better housing facilities. In other words, how the slum rehabilitation or upgradation is happening. The second indicator is talking about just access to improved water source. International indicator, if you look for the same target, talks about not just water, but water, sanitation, area of the house, the type of construction of the house, security of tenure, all these things are there. I don't see why all of this is not reflected in the national indicators. One reason could be that some of these are appearing in other goals and other targets. But I agree with Soumya that it is necessary then to say that at least that this particular indicator which comes in XYZ place is also an indicator for this goal. Though those cross-cutting relationships need to be highlighted, because otherwise it becomes meaningless that you have a house and you have water and that means that you have a good housing condition. That is what essentially this is saying. So these are the two comments as far as this particular target is concerned. For the other targets, I really don't see why the indicators are still work in progress, because the international indicators are good enough. Even if those are taken as it is, it would be perfectly alright, especially for disaster management. If you look at the indicator international, very in a detailed manner, the various types of disasters have been defined. What needs to be done in the case of each disaster has also been outlined. It's like that single indicator description runs into several pages. So I don't see why this is taking so much time. It can directly go into the Indian indicators. That is my personal feeling. However, and I have been listening to the discussions since morning. People have been talking about what is the objective of these indicators, and where do how much importance should we give to them and all that. I feel that apart from just looking at these as instruments for measuring progress, one can also think of these indicators as guiding principles for developing processes. So from that perspective also, I tried to do an analysis of SDG 11 in the Indian context. Now in the Indian context, urban development is sort of a concurrent subject. And there are three levels to how it unfolds, and there is a fairly well defined structure as to what each level is supposed to do. So the central government has two ministries which are related with urban development. One is Ministry of Urban Development and the other is Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation. These are supposed to provide the policy framework, funding, technical assistance and monitoring services. At the state level, the specifics of that policy have to be defined, laws have to be formulated, etc. And at the urban local body level, the actual implementation of the policy has to happen. Now, what is actually happening is, because a lot of funding for projects comes directly from the central government to the urban local body, the central government also gets a lot of power to dictate terms to the urban local body as to how that city should develop, which I think is an unhealthy practice, unconstitutional I would say, because if we are talking about empowering the local administrative bodies, this goes totally against it. Unfortunately, now that has become part of an official policy. Under the smart city policy, for example, we are essentially handing over the city's development process to a special purpose vehicle, which is a couple of steps removed from the elected representatives of the citizens, which goes totally against the whole principle of Panchayati Raj. So firstly, I think it is important to use, I don't know whether this particular process is the forum to highlight this, but we need that somewhere we use this SDG push to try and free the urban local bodies to be more autonomous in deciding how they want their urban development to unfold. Currently there are these many policies which are in one way or other linked with urban development processes. It's also important to see for us as civil society organizations how these existing policies reflect SDG 11. We have done some preliminary analysis and I'm not going to go into that, but the answer is currently there is very poor reflection of SDG 11 in the existing policies. So this is one task which needs to happen, aligning the existing policies with SDG 11. And from that perspective, if you look at what is SDG 11 talking about, there are four aspects. One is inclusive, safe, sustainable and resilient. I'll not go into the details of this, but after a lot of brainstorming we realized that if we think of urban development within the framework of these three limits, that on one hand we want the urban development to have minimum local environmental impacts like polluted water, polluted air, etc., minimum carbon footprint contribution, and it should minimize its climate vulnerability, and at the same time the development process should be targeted towards minimizing the socio-economic inequity in the urban space. If we can sort of use this litmus test, then we feel that automatically the urban development will take us towards inclusive, safe, sustainable and resilient. Taking a step further and using these indicators, what I am proposing is that one can say link these indicators with these three limits. So let's say this is just an example to illustrate the point. Let's say that indicator A and B, whatever they may be, are related with environmental impact, C and D are related with climate change, and E and F are related with inequity. And if we can rank the indicators on a scale of 0 to 10, where closer to 0 is better, because we want to minimize impacts. So closer to 0 is better, closer to 10 is bad. Then we can actually have a polygon which represents a particular city and its present state, and then you can also define where the city wants to go in terms of these indicators over say 10 years, 20 years, etc., which then gives a clear, more or clearer idea for creating a roadmap for that city. This will be a process that is unique to each city. It cannot be dictated from a central level like the smart city policy or Amrut is currently dictating that these should be your priorities. The priorities will vary from location to location. So localization of this entire SDG 11 and its indicators, and this is just a suggestion that a possible framework around this can be developed. We have identified a number of questions to sort of unpack these issues. I am not going to go into the details of that. The presentation is here where we can, I would request you to take a look at it, and please feel free to use this wherever you feel appropriate. So basically this is what I am saying, that we need to firstly insist that the indicator should be not just finalized but should again be, we should be given time again to comment on those indicators which are not yet developed. I mean, I am a bit worried that what is going to happen is this particular public process has happened and the indicators which are not yet developed will just be pushed through without any public discourse happening. So that is something which we have to be careful about. Let the states and the urban local bodies have the freedom to flesh out their own SDG 11 development trajectory. The central government's role should be focused not on deciding how cities should develop, but more on building capacity at the local body level for them to be able to make those decisions, and aligning current policies with SDG 11, which is going to be the toughest task, not because it cannot be done, but because there is a total lack of political will currently to do anything like that. So this is an area where civil society, I feel, needs to focus on. So that's it. Thank you.